Dexter, and I have a quick little talk called one of three titles: We Don't See a Problem, or Why I'm Not a Lawyer. It should be the most terrifying words you ever hear. And Michael Dexter goes all Martin Luther. I understand that everyone has the talk if you want to click the links, but the links are all based on like really quick internet searches, so you can find pretty much all the content. So the theme and thesis is that governance is a thing. We'll talk about that. And thank you, Warner, for illustrating the state of where we're at and covering the key points and issues. I appreciate that. And my key question is, how did we get to this point? So let's explore. First, we'll explore governance. And in this community, the broader open source free software foundations and projects community, a lot's been written about this topic. Running through a few organizations: FreeBSD Foundation, FreeBSD Foundation, FreeBSD Foundation, Apache, Software Freedom Conservancy, Free Software Foundation, Software in the Public Interest, which helps out OpenGFS with its stewardship and financial handling, OSI, Linux Foundation, Debian Foundation, Arch Project, SUSE Project, GNOME Foundation. You can spend all day just, spend all day looking for these. Go for it. They've all gone with established procedures to follow. As a legal entity, the FreeBSD Foundation has key laws it must comply with, but foundation projects, especially Debian and larger operating system projects that are very heavy with volunteers like FreeBSD, have very well established operating guidelines. And in a few places I'll point out the ones from the Apache Foundation, which are, in my estimation, really well thought out because they balance the role of large vendors like IBM and Eclipse and other folks. So moving on about governance. University of California, which oversees UCB, and the Japan Radiological Society, the American Association of Teachers of German, the Botanical Society of America, the University of Texas System, the Oregon region of the Classic Car Club of America, City of Vancouver Automotive License Plate Collectors Association, Canadian Federation of University of Women, Ottawa, the Huntsville Chess Club, and the International Team of Implantology, the Latvian Open Source Association, Board of Control of the Cricket of India. They all have very good guidelines that dictate their internal operations, how to handle things like conflict of interest, and we are light years away from this. So, show of hands, has anyone worked with nonprofit organizations or other government institutions? 1, 2, 3, quite a few hands didn't go up. You don't have to trust me on this one bit. Type in any search engine of choice, botanical and bylaws, and you'll find many examples of botanical societies with rather well-established bylaws. And if you prefer not trust me, just email their president, chair, treasurer, auditor, you name it, and have them explain what the role of those documents are. Because I'm just here to highlight the fact that this is a big thing outside of FreeBSD. And I think it would be very helpful for FreeBSD to follow the absolute standard worldwide models of how this is done. And I did go through every document that FreeBSD has on these topics, and there's very little written. But let's explore that. So, why do they embrace governance? The Australian Institute of Company Directors writes, good governance is at the heart of any successful business or organization. It is essential for a company or organization to achieve its objectives and drive improvement, as well as maintain legal and ethical standing in the eyes of its shareholders, let's say stakeholders in there, regulators, and the wider community. Governance is not simply a concern for large companies, but for any business or organization of any size or shape. Think of those regional botanical societies. They get this. They absolutely understand that, put it in writing, and when they take office, they agree to follow those rules. So the benefits of good governance outweigh the costs. Good governance is a broad concept to be covered under a single political system of any country, but the crucial factor on any effective governance is where the decision-making authority lies and how it is exercised. Authority should be accompanied by accountability and responsibility, without which good governance cannot be enshrined into any system. Blah, blah, blah. You can find things written about this all day and night. Don't trust me on this. Please trust the broader communities out there. Essence of good governance: safeguarding the interests of stakeholders through transparency, accountability, trustworthiness, and responsibility. Good corporate governance also calls for good communications for the transmission of reliable, relevant, and timely information to stakeholders. Last but not least, corporate governance is also about culture, values, and style. So your organization's reputation is the most valuable asset. And these words will come up: reputation, trust, and confidence. Contributors love. That requires these. Donors love these. They are like, let's look at your 990 for the foundation. Let's see what you're doing with that money. Let's see how those programs and how those dollars go from their pocket through a system to hosting an event like this and contributing to making that happen. All the wonderful things the foundation does. So, quote unquote, the FreeBSD bylaws created the core team as the governing body of FreeBSD, but gave no further guidance. I've been talking to various folks like PHK and said, hey, what's your take on all this? And his comment was, the core team was what I could get you at the time, but I did give you a democracy, so you can change that. Okay, let's see what I can do. I'm just one person with zero authority around here, but we'll see if anyone agrees. And straight out of the books, the core team is elected by the committers from the pool of committers and serves as the board of directors of the FreeBSD project. It promotes active contributors and committers, assigns people to well-defined hats, and is the final arbiter of decisions involving which way the project should be heading. Okay, better than nothing. I'll grant you that. Board of directors is a very weighted term, given that all those botanical societies and software foundations and corporate foundations and governments all have extremely clearly defined board of directors and what the rules and obligations are that they must follow, especially including the FreeBSD Foundation. So if you're not trusting me on that, go look at their bylaws. It just flat out does them right there, no secret. So the project and foundation are separate, which is an argument I've heard for years, where the FreeBSD Foundation is doing its thing, the project does its thing, and I'm sure that has advantages and disadvantages. It leads some development that might not be done by volunteers. It brings money to events like this. It hosts tables, and thank you, Alan. I think we make the Linux Fest Northwest, we'll join a table, other stuff. It's like, wow, that's cool. If anyone wants a foundation micromanaging the project or vice versa, so there's the gray area between these extremes. So, there is a relationship nonetheless. It's quite symbiotic, and they share the same name smack in the middle of it. Notice that, say, Software in the Public Interest Spies for Debian, doesn't say Debian in the title, although for a long time it was like the Debian Foundation. There's that sort of optical separation, but I think this came up quite recently. The project could continue without the foundation. If it went away tomorrow, the project would carry on in various ways for probably eternity. But the foundation would be irrelevant without the project. So I'd argue the project has some obligations to the foundation. It's in its name. It needs to clarify what those are. And moving on, the foundation legal and fiscal obligations and its mission to serve the project. Mission is an excellent word. It's heavily used in all these nonprofit circles. It's a bit vague for the foundation, especially that there are two differently worded ones on two different pages when you look for what the foundation does. I suggest that it just harmonized. I've been helping a FreeBSD related vendor clean up all their documentation like this, and yeah, it's stuff like this that just confuses people. But FreeBSD Foundation is a 501c3. In many countries, that would be an NGO, a nonprofit organization. Key point is, in the American scheme, public benefit. It reports to the people and is obliged to maintain its mission, or else it gets in trouble. Netherlands, I guess, a stichting, if I pronounce that right.
Stichting.
Stichting, thank you. Yeah, there are a few more syllables there than I expected. And EV in Germany. Anyway, lots of variations around the world. I do have some insights on European ones, lived there 8 years and looked at how we can do some cross-border work. Netherlands is awesome. Otherwise, you have like 27 countries, 26, and 26 different financial systems that govern all this. So, yeah, so we do what we can. And it's dedicated to supporting and promoting the FreeBSD project and community worldwide. Cool, that's a good thing. And that's the very clear relationship between the two, one project and one foundation. Yay. So let's start doing a little scrutiny. If the foundation is dependent, and I'm reading this because there are a lot of non-native English speakers here, so Some people think that reading your slides is a very bad thing. I agree in the right context, but here, for the benefit of those who might be more comfortable hearing English and reading it at the same time, here we go. If the foundation is dependent on the project must not jeopardize the public benefit nonprofit status of the foundation. Is that a controversial statement or not?
Do you feel that
Do we have a legal obligation to do that? I don't think so.
May I continue? You keep so. Yeah, we'll get to
You
that.
asked a question.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, repeat it.
Oh, I was saying, I don't think the project has a legal obligation to the foundation in any way, shape, or form.
It's in its mission, and the foundation is obliged to execute its mission. If it varies from that, the IRS gets a little sneaky.
right?
Right.
The foundation is a distinct entity from the project, and you can't confuse the two.
Yeah, you're confusing the two right here, and you can't do that. There is no legal obligation of the project to do anything. We could make billions of dollars and the foundation would not be affected.
We, the project.
We, the project.
Okay.
The project's not a legal entity at all. So I'm having trouble understanding this point.
Okay,
That's all
well, then I'll
I'm
move on.
Well, my question was, do you feel there's something the project is doing that is jeopardizing the public benefit of the foundation?
You've seen my slides.
Did I miss something?
I'll continue, and I'll get to that.
So it's later in the slide.
It's in a-
It's-
No, it's in, the next few
You said-
slides are about this very topic.
Okay. So it's not a slide you've already seen.
Apparently my slides were shared. So.
You should have shared them on the developer wiki page. That's the typical thing we do at developer summits. I shared my slides this morning.
I presented them to my mentor as a heads up of what to put on the schedule, and we did not have a dialogue of what to do next. I'll gladly put them up.
But apparently in the slides there were comments by other developers in the project. That's what got me confused.
You have to have a constant dialogue. Anyway, I'll continue if that's okay. So, for the most part, they're legally separate. So, a few comments of other areas in the community. What does the alternative look like when a foundation is not public benefit, when it is pay to play? And they're out there, and that's cool, they've made that decision. They have, the Linux Foundation is a fantastic example. When you look at its board of directors, you've got pay-to-play members like GitLab, Facebook, HTC Labs, Samsung, Qualcomm, Cisco, VMware, Microsoft, Oracle, Huawei, Comcast, Microsoft. So,
what does pay-to-play mean exactly?
to achieve status in the organization.
What's the difference between the 501c3?
Sure, that's a very good question. A C3 is public benefit. It is obliged to meet the needs of the broader public, typically with educational initiatives, be it arts programs. And there is a fundamental difference between the US and Europe typically, where in the US they push that on the private sector. In Europe they allow the government to handle that. They think we will have the Arts Institute, we will pay people, we will pay musicians to create music. I'm like, okay. Americans have their SWAT teams, whereas that's just a different approach to it. So C6 has zero obligations there. They're tax deductible as, say, marketing or cost of business to businesses. When an individual donates money to a C6, they do not receive a tax write-off. With a C3 organization, they can, on their tax form, say, this is money I have shifted to the public good, because that's my decision, and under that mechanism, they in the US.
Yeah, so for a non-US citizen, it doesn't matter.
As a donor, yes.
As a donor, yeah.
And back in the heyday of BSD fund, I found that most of my donors were outside the US, so the need for a public benefit nonprofit was moot for many of the donors. That's just a nuance. They're just tools to achieve goals. So, in this model, paying your way up the tree is just fine. That's actually encouraged. And the more you pay, the more benefits you get from the foundation. Fine. So, the foundation maintains a conflict of interest policy in its bylaws. I think it would get its approval if it didn't have one. So raising the question, what conflict of interest policies can the project and foundation provide a contributor or tax authority should an employee of a foundation donor serve on the project, board of directors, core team, to alleviate any concerns that the employee will only act for the project and thus public benefit mission of the foundation? There's a lot of overlap around here where people wear a bunch of different hats, be it project, be it foundation, be it core, be it you name it. Some of those hats, if they are in the foundation, are subject to the conflict of interest guidelines in the bylaws of the foundation. That is without question. What do we do when there is very heavy overlap between those? I have not seen any language written of how to handle that, but I believe it's a valid concern.
Do you have a hypothetical?
Yeah, do you have a specific example?
On the foundation website are the notion of partners, which are the larger donors to the foundation. And from an optics perspective, that potentially mirrors the, say, Linux Foundation model, where these companies are the top participants and top donors and have the most say in the organization. Are there any overlaps between those partners, to use their term, and the core team, these separate entities?
The partners have nothing to say more than other donors.
Are there any overlaps between the two, people or otherwise?
Between which two?
Netflix is listed as a partner on a separate.
Are you alleging that I'm somehow in conflict of interest and doing something wrong, Dexter?
I am curious.
All this in your window, is there something specific?
What guidelines do we follow
I don't know, are you alleging that I have done something improper?
What guidelines would one turn to if anyone was to have a concern about these objects? And I'm just doing it as a participant who wants to see all of this succeed.
Okay, if you're doing this as a participant who is looking for this to succeed, where has this caused a failure?
We illustrated that extremely well in your earlier outline of what's going wrong in the project and how, and as I've put it in my second slide, how did we get to this point? And I believe this to be without an operator's manual for these issues, how to handle, well, I'll get into, working with volunteers and how to retain them, et cetera, et cetera. So, do all project board of directors, core team candidates submit a potential conflict of interest statements?
Instance between what things?
Participation in foundation, its major contributors, its role in the project, which are very separate until they aren't.
Foundation are separate, except for, I suppose, the people that are on close. Right? This term would be a rotated candidate.
Yep.
Okay. But I don't see what that has to do with Netflix.
It's a partner as defined on the
Yes.
foundation website. It has staff on the core team.
But the core team and foundation aren't the same.
What guidelines do they follow to guarantee that? Can you point me to them? Because I must have missed them. I could be a complete idiot here and I've missed those guidelines that are so common that the floral organizations have them, but we don't.
So, and your point is what? Do you have some specific guidelines you'd like to recommend?
I've already answered that, but I'll elaborate. Apache handles it extremely well, and I'll go into examples there. And all these organizations out there, are there any non-core team members in the room that are equally confused or not confused?
To be honest, I have no idea what you're reaching for.
Yeah,
So going back to the second slide, which I can do if you like, about the governance models of the projects of the world. on the outside of FreeBSD, this is a thing. That's the whole topic of my presentation. It's a really good thing.
I've been part of many volunteer organizations in Sweden, of course, because
Great.
we existed.
Yep.
And this has never been brought up anywhere.
Any other open source projects?
Not any open source projects, no.
What is an example of projects?
Sports mostly.
Okay.
Sports
projects with a fee?
Well, sports teams, because sports teams in Sweden are run as volunteer organizations.
Do they have statutes?
We have
bylaws?
Yeah, we have what's basically bylaws.
You've answered my question. Thank you. That's exactly my point. Are there financial interests in those, or is it just how they operate as a group?
Is how we operate as a group.
Okay. That's exactly the point I'm getting at.
Okay.
You've made it. Thank
The
you.
FreeBSD project has bylaws that tell us how we operate as a group.
Yeah.
They're just significantly more vague than other places.
And thank you for affirming my point. I appreciate that. That's exactly it. Yes.
So your point is.
And I'm failing to see how that point gets to, there's a problem. We specifically designed it to be, we knew that if we could not trust the core team when we wrote the bylaws, that no amount of bylaws would protect us from a bad core team.
Are there impeachment procedures in the bylaws? Or just
Yes.
election procedures?
I believe
There are impeachment procedures in
Can
the
you point me to
bylaws.
them?
Have you not read the
For
bylaws?
the core election.
The bylaws allow for any committer to call, to start a petition to recall the board of directors. The board of directors can, by a majority vote, I'm not reading here, I'm reciting from memories, by a 2/3 majority vote, eject members of the core team.
What document are they on? I can print out every bylaw.
They're in the bylaws. The bylaws have this in them.
Okay.
I'm
Board members
sorry.
and committers may be ejected by a two-third vote of core, it says. A petition of 1/3 of active committers can trigger an early election.
Okay.
That was point 1, 2, 3, and 6 in the core bylaws.
So you can force a re-election, but not actually impeach an individual.
Isn't that basically the same thing?
The core team can remove members of the core team. We have done it before.
Okay.
When, in the first core team I served on, we voted someone out because they were not,
But that's
they
core.
were not doing their job.
That's core voting core out.
That's true, the court
Yes.
does that.
And then if core fails to do that, the committers could then
If
say.
it's functionally sufficient,
Then the committers can.
because say that we decide that we really don't like the way Alden Styles is behaved, and that we really want to remove him from the core team because of that. We speaking as committers can petition core and say, you know, Alan's face hair is offensive to us. He must be removed from core.
I am a small hold, there is in fact no impeachment procedure for an individual member of core
Yes.
from the community at large.
Multi-director.
Well, there are mechanisms.
Yeah.
Since core is elected as a way of whole, you might not necessarily want to impeach a single member. I might say, okay, we want someone who knows networking stuff. I don't want to just deal with that one person. We need a whole new set of people. You might like to say one too much.
Well, it depends on, I mean, it depends on the reasons, right? It is entirely possible for one individual to be the problem, but I would expect the rest of the core team to take appropriate actions, and if they don't, then by definition I want all of them gone.
One situation in particular that does come up, I have seen it frequently in completely unrelated projects, is that one member goes bad, but the rest of the team is incestuous enough that they protect the bad individual.
Yeah.
Right, in
And-
FreeBSD, that would only be handled through
Yeah.
So if we remove one membership core member, then there is another election for this seat, or how it works? Or the core is just
re-elect.
No,
okay.
I think
There's a rule, if the size of core falls below 7, an early election is held.
Okay.
So it's 1, it's 1.
Ooh, ooh, hang on my face. So, do.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you, but we can see you.
That's fine.
Okay, then I missed that in my extensive searches. There's one point, yay, got my face. I would like to see that back to the conflict of interest policy. I don't think it would hurt Many organizations have them.
It's difficult because the FreeBSD project is not
Same with the Dexter project.
Right.
There are lots of them out there. And the sports groups in Sweden.
Well, no, the sports groups are a legal entity now in Sweden.
Yep. Okay. Fine.
Like,
I think it's more,
This pretty much feels,
the conflict of interest policy, particularly is if the project were to adopt one. Because the project's not a legal entity, it doesn't mean anything. It would simply be enforced by consensus, the same way we're dealing with it now. That if I agree, I'm gonna make sure I don't do these things because I may be conflicted out of them. Because there's no legal entity withstanding to hold me to that policy.
True.
It's not materially different whether I've agreed to specific verbiage or not, other than the clarity around exactly what I'm going to do.
We do have the code of conduct, which is the closest to that kind of agreement to be good.
Right, well, yeah, I mean, the code of conduct may be a good example where that only works really by consensus. And I think you can see from manuals what happens when that isn't necessarily there.
Well, yeah.
And so what that, to me, says that when we talk about the relationship between core and the foundation, the foundation is a thing, an independent thing. The project isn't. It's simply a bunch of servers and URLs that people go to get things. And we all happen to put things there, but it's not.
Have you donated to the foundation? Have you donated to the FreeBSD Foundation? Do you think they're donating to the foundation itself or the project as its cool? It's an nice OS.
Generally speaking, when they donated to the foundation, there was definitely a distinction between the project and the foundation.
Okay. Have they donated hardware to the project?
Some donated hardware. In a lot of cases, it was a project donation more directed at developers working in the area, where they sponsor that kind of work, where it's more vague. They don't have a specific thing they want, so it's not any of that sort of thing.
Okay.
well, it's not possible to donate hardware to the FreeBSD project because it's not.
Other than just
Yep. But they are looking at this thing, regardless of its legal status, and sending things its way in support of it, saying, we like what you're doing. That's great, and we want to encourage that, very much so. So, about democracy. This came up earlier, and I thank you, Warner, for that. Transparency. There will always be sensitive topics between individuals and bad things that happen in life, and a need for executive session.
Okay.
Is it?
Execution session.
Yes! Thank you, I'm correct. Yay!
People not in the
Yay, shall I fix that now? Okay, executive session. So I want to preemptively respond to that point. But there's a small trend of things like the OpenZFS project having open discussions and conference calls and you name it. And Alan, have you found that effective? Healthy?
Yes. There can be a problem with too many people trying to talk.
No question. No question. It takes moderation. Take a chairperson to be a moderator.
Yeah. Similar to it's exactly like the working groups. They're trying to bring more and more of the FreeBSD. It only helps if there's a topic in the agenda.
No question.
Otherwise, it gets. I don't know.
No disagreement for
I don't
me.
know how we would have just a FreeBSD call.
Could core have a call that's open? That's simply, if you can listen in and like follow Robert's rules or whatever, that allow you to say a raised hand, that in some of those nifty conference things have a raised hand. Aren't the cores a black box?
That's an excellent idea, Michael. I love that idea.
Thank you.
Warner proposed it 2 years ago.
didn't this new
Hey, the core team has talked about this in several meetings prior.
Cool.
Finding some way to have a subset of the agenda that's not personnel related that we could talk through.
Yay, how's it coming?
Well, we've already seen some improvements in that. The core reports being sent out.
Monthly instead of once every 2 years.
I mean, I think there's room for further improvement, but there is improvement already there.
Yeah, well, this is a learning experience, and we need to find some way to have the meetings be productive if we are to have a public meeting, and not have it be crazy.
No disagreement for me.
Oh. One of the things that when we first started, for instance, at the beginning of this term, is we were meeting once a month as a group, and we are now meeting more actually more frequently than once a week at this point in time, because there's enough material for us to go over and to move through in order to begin setting some of this stuff up. So I'm cautious about solution searching for problem kind of things right now when a lot of this is already in effect, because it's been researched and understood in terms of what needs to happen. It's a matter of time, effort, and execution, but those are all things that are largely in process right now.
How do we not repeat bottoming out on all that? In the outside world, they follow just guidelines and bylaws that explain and document all those processes. And if you need to put it down, we found that weekly meetings works. Document it. Document all this that's now succeeding for future generations. That's why they create these.
Establish the culture first, then codify and leave that behind as the culture afterwards.
We have
For
the
the part
culture.
being, we don't need, like for instance, there's overhead and friction, not only in developers, but there's also with regards to project oversight and governance, where none of this stuff just kind of happens for free. It takes time and effort on our part. And with an established running thing, you put processes in place in order to codify norms so that there isn't a deviation. We're not in that position right now. That is, however, what is happening, where we are putting these things in place.
Excellent.
Problem is time zones. What if you're in a time zone and the meeting is in a whole other time zone and you cannot participate?
Or her OT. That one is easy to fix.
Not about core, but
They're not.
people want to.
Well, I mean, or it's fairly easy to fix. What you have to do is you have to have the meeting in different times. So you circle it like first week of month it is perfect. I mean, it's afternoons in Europe, next time it's afternoons in US, and then it's afternoons in Asia, and then it's afternoons in Russia or something.
Jorgen in OpenZFS is in Tokyo, and they moved the meeting a few hours to have his days when he can make it and have the days when others can make it. So yes, there are solutions. Yes, time zones suck. I'm sure a bunch of us are jet lagged, etc. But there are solutions, and the commitments there, great. That's awesome. That's the most has been said about that at the beginning of this meeting, which I appreciate. Thank you. So this whole democracy thing, I'm still, having operated in these circles outside of FreeBSD, it's still going to nag me, and in individual conversations we have agreed to disagree. But let me at least make my case. I'll try, and you can agree or disagree. So the pillars of democracy, and they've been debating this for a few thousand years. Transparency with executive session option. I've emphasized, yes, there's always something sensitive to talk about, and when you should have an open door. I get that, and I encourage that. Rule of law, rights to citizens and constituents, separation of powers, social norms, expectations and rules, distinction between authority and leadership. A lot's been said about transparency. I'm hearing more about a commitment to transparency today than the last many, many years. That's great, thank you, kudos, hooray, yay.
Have you?
We lost you, maybe?
Sounded like something happened.
Oh, well, we had your projector, but did it go to sleep or not?
No, I was going to say something. I decided to let Michael continue and didn't shut my mouth quite quickly enough. I'm sorry, Michael, go on.
I'm all ears. Okay. Quick Google searches, you can find all this. I'm happy to post a slide with all the links. Transparent nonprofits receive 53% more contributions, and we're stronger organizations.
Transparent in what way?
Everything they operate with, the meeting minutes, you name it, because somehow we got to a point that we're all discussing this, and then as Warner beautifully illustrated, we have all these issues to address. Somehow we got there from succeeding to not succeeding to committing to succeed again. And I think underlying rules work for other organizations would be great here, but that would make them alone.
None of those things have to do with the nonprofit.
Projects can commit to following more guidelines. They can, really.
Yes, I guess maybe your definition of contributions is going to be broader than.
contributions come in all forms, and that touches on a cultural issue I'll touch on later, where developer versus committer versus, I think there was an established, some kind of friend of the project, where it was someone who's not a committer yet a recognized participant. I feel
Yeah,
a lot of
someone's documented on in the developer handbook, who is a,
what's the term?
you know, what's a developer, what's a contributor, and what's a friend of the project.
Are there outreach efforts surrounding that? Because to watch people cringe in this room earlier when it's like developers and committers are different folks and they're maybe working really hard. We'll get to the Bucharest example later, but it came up last night.
There are outreach efforts,
Okay.
and they can be better.
Okay, let's make them better.
With what manpower?
It's easy to say, but like,
Yes, we all want it to be better, but what can we do to make it better specifically?
I've made the Beehive calls better from stalled completely to very active to bringing in different vendors and turning from an Intel engineer who only attended one call to uplifting, say, the UEFI GOP code to the new version as a prototype that can HTTP boot. It's a question of management, not like commit bits and stuff. So I want to help with that. I've been snubbed in various ways on that, which is fine, you're right. But I think there's a fundamental cultural question about the notion of a commitment being authority. And that is the driving force in all of the bylaws. And I think we've done ourselves a disservice having watched us grind ourselves at times into the ground with, say, whatever it was, lack of leadership that got us a code of conduct that was somewhat incompatible with the project and its own concerns. It addressed rare issues as opposed to less frequent. And I found that this whole time thing, working with a lot of developers over the years, is purely a question of motivation. They will drop things for you if you talk to them correctly. And I can demonstrate that. But you're welcome to disagree. Blah, blah, blah.
Nobody disagrees with that. You are beating a dead horse here. Please get to the point.
Okay? The more we can do for transparency, and glad we're doing what we're doing, will reward us as a project. The rule of law, the project has excellent rules for developers. Whether or not they're always followed varies, but the rules are very, very good. I've watched a few, at least the Beehive Circles issues about copyright, where people modify people's copyrights, where they remove them, where they do other things. And I think as a project, we really need to very clearly state the risks of anything legal like that.
Michael,
Has anyone in this room? Yes.
if we have to explicitly say in the rules that people should not modify people's copyrights, we have a big problem. I'm not saying
How
that
so?
it
You
never.
think people should know that?
Yeah.
I agree. But
not maybe a onboarding question.
Somehow it happens, and I don't know. I'm all ears on what would prevent that. Thank you for emphasizing
Did it
that.
happen by mistake or?
Okay.
I'm asking. I don't know which case you are referring to, but honestly, it's logical to me that you.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But you've worked with a lot of companies, vendors and such, where you probably have even NDAs and other goodies and legal stuff.
Yeah, a bit.
Okay. So,
So Michael, this has been a very strong cultural thing that we have told people when they mess up and they don't mess up again in the project. It is one of the core unwritten rules. You're correct about that, perhaps. I haven't gone and read through everything. I thought we had some advice on this, but talking about copyright notices also constitutes legal advice, and that's something that is difficult to put into writing. without creating liability.
Okay, perfect segue. Thank you. So, you may have seen my comment out in the open, this epiphany. There are two types of BSD developers, those who remember the Berkeley lawsuit and those who don't. And show of hands who's familiar with the Berkeley lawsuit? Back in the day, way back?
Know that it exists?
3 that know, oh wow.
Before I was born.
Okay, and I will never fault anyone for not being born at a certain point, because they were often crappy times and you wouldn't want to be a witness to. So anyway, I was hoping GNN would be here because I'm sure he has some insights. But this giant, massive lawsuit, which is well documented on Wikipedia, etc., ended up being about 6 little files where the Berkeley project hadn't adequately replaced 6 stupid little files.
That was, the settlement was about 6 files, the lawsuit was.
Okay, broader lawsuit. Came down to 6 files.
It also was a problem on AT&T's. There's also a problem on AT&T's side where they had copied a number of files as well.
Fair enough. So, talk to the old farts, and they have their various comments on this. Most recently, Dave Burgess, who maintained the 386DFT fact, responded to me, remember the lawsuit? I still have to disclose my AT&T cease and desist letter for my clearance every 5 years, probably referring to security clearance with the government. So, yes, Warner, it is a challenge to super accurately codify those rules to follow, especially if just developers with some vague guidance. But for the suffering that can come from piddly lawsuits, Linus Torvalds says that, you know, if they're having to BSD tied up in this lawsuit, there'd probably be no Linux, you know. It did a disservice to BSD as a lawsuit. Now, various folks will have visceral understanding of this and react vocally, and some will say, I'm not born, you're forgiven for not being born, but understand that there are these repercussions of little piddly little things.
To make the point that's on your slide there, the problem is the project, which isn't a legal entity, can't provide each committer with legal advice about how they should deal with copyrights.
Okay, well, let's explore exactly that. Thank you for the segue. So,
I'm saying you can't do that.
I am of the personal opinion that I am not a lawyer, but should be the most terrifying words you ever hear, especially a volunteer project, which is what you're getting at, that volunteers are like, well, I'm just doing stuff. Would you agree or disagree that volunteers are capable of doing illegal stuff inside or outside of the project?
Agree. I'm just saying you can't provide them legal advice to prevent them doing that.
Well, let's see. A few things about patterns of yes, we have rules, and are they being enforced? I don't know about that. Hold on to that. So, does the project or foundation have legal counsel that it turns to?
Foundation does.
And does it bring up these issues that come up with code in the project as it relates to the various licenses we have, or commitment to various licenses, etc.? Every time this comes up, when someone says we have an issue, but I think it's this, I strongly suggest we talk to legal counsel. Really strongly.
And
they can help.
Did somebody ask the foundation to do that? The foundation's not just going to know that this issue exists. Somebody would have to bring it to the foundation and ask them to ask their lawyer.
So 6 months ago, I brought a point to Deb and Ted, but yes?
Every time I've talked with, and I don't talk to the foundation all the time, but every time we've talked about that, it's a choice of, do we want to give thousands of dollars to a lawyer, or do we want to spend it on hardware, or on engineering time? So the foundation has to choose, right?
Okay.
And so that's a hard choice to make, and yes, there are cases where absolutely they should spend the money on a lawyer, but they're also trying to avoid doing that as much as possible, because that money just disappears, right? Once you spend that,
it depends on the question.
That could be the best spent money you ever spend.
But it's also a bottomless pit, right? You have to be very, very careful.
It also depends
It's hard
on
to count the lawsuits you're not in.
Right.
Right.
Like, I will never contribute to ATF because it asks me to sign the Google seal.
ATF, but
The testing framework.
Testing framework that we use.
Yeah.
I've written so many tests for package and other tools in the FreeBSD project using ATF and pointed out little problems, but I will never send a diff to that project because I refuse to sign the Google CLA because I'm not a lawyer. And I don't personally do this for fun, so I'm not gonna hire a lawyer and spend tens of thousands of my own money to have them explain it to me because I'm just an engineer. Right? I'm not a lawyer. And I don't want to invest my money there. So
How did Java go through this process? The legal side, going from the contributors through the foundation. I mean, that would seem like an example of one that actually followed the process you're talking about.
Well, they have a CLA, yeah. You have to sign all your, there's a horrible document.
Right. But I'm saying how we got
Yeah.
the JDK boards and that whole.
yes,
What's the CLA?
contributor license agreement?
Yeah,
So,
basically,
If there weren't.
you no longer own it, they own it.
copyright to a project so that if they want to say remove the all rights reserved line from the copyright message, they own all the code and do that. Instead of, or like over the sale, and try to reach out and find everybody after the fact. And it was a problem.
What foundation folks do we have here?
And
Candidates? May I field an idea? Set up a donation target for a legal fund for the benefit of the project and the foundation, so that a donor is sending money that way. I found that all of a menu of donations rocks with donors. They love that.
I thought the 501c3 cannot do that.
If they initiate it, they can do whatever they want in setting up programming and that. They can absolutely do. The outside world can't ask for that. I'm on the fence between the two as a participant in the community. I don't know what precedences we have from the foundation, maybe you know, Benedict, of where we said the foundation's raising money to do foo. We ever done that? They ever done that?
No, the foundation can solicit on
Yeah,
a topic, but it can't take a donation intended for the topic.
Yeah,
So
we
you
can
can say,
fund it.
we intend to do X, give us money. But you can't, out of the blue, a third party can't come in and say, here's cash, do Y. So that's the.
If the board initiates it, in my experience, they say, we see a need in our community. The need is that we want legal representation, we'll find some good representation, and we fully understand that many developers prefer not to have their hard-earned dollars and yen and topics or whatever go towards that rather than hardware and other good stuff and events. I see no trouble with that, and back in my 3 years with open source nonprofits, before the 2008 financial bust, it worked extremely effectively. Any objections to that idea in principle? So we don't, compete with donations for hardware and events and travel and all the good stuff?
It all comes down to a cost-benefit analysis, Michael, where when we have risk that we want to mitigate, we won't mitigate all risk just by spending more money on lawyers. The best we can do is have a lawyer point out to us what risks we're taking. And it's up to us to decide if those are acceptable risks or not acceptable risks. There's no magic get out of jail free card by talking to a lawyer.
Usually, most of the questions we've asked the lawyer about copyrights or patents have resulted in an answer of maybe.
Well,
Yeah,
yes,
it
because that's how lawyers work.
Sounds
Previous comment,
odd.
bottomless pit.
Yes.
I have suggested legal counsel that Dev corners at many events, and I think there are opportunities there, having worked with them on legal agreements for various projects. So, can we do a tiny leap of faith and at least hear me out on that one?
We're doing it for the cost.
This idea of lawyers are bad or waste of time, waste of money.
Michael, you don't get that leap of faith from me. I'm sorry, you're not established credibility to talk intelligently and authoritatively on this topic.
Okay, but I will cite my work with Karen Sandler and Bradley Kuhn to two of the absolute top authorities in Free Software Foundation out there. And let's let the community decide. Yeah, you're entitled to your opinion. That's cool. I will spell this out, and you can shoot it down or go for it. Whatever works. What?
We're running.
Is the next session scheduled? No, it wasn't. The last time I checked and everyone arrived half an hour late. So, then I'll speed up. So either way, I know we've had questions and we've both agreed that it's not clear if a DTS file is read, compiled, loaded into memory, read back, if that is essentially a copy of the original or if that is an independently obtained set of documentation of that hardware that can be under whatever copyright or license you please, public domain or otherwise. That's a very concrete legal question that I've seen numerous email messages about and no answers.
I do think this concrete question is.
I can draw a diagram.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know which lawyer is going to give you an affirmative, a definitive yes or no answer to a question like that.
None of them till strike court.
True, but one of the people I mentioned is a top GPL enforcer on the planet. He's actually pretty aware of these issues and has been participating in the lawsuit. So, no, they're actually really good at that. Just a thought. At the issues at hand, expertise, subject matter expertise on these legal. Do we lose one?
I can try.
Okay. Anyway. Review, blah, 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 blah. We've seen.
Well, you only need a million guesses. Go.
Yeah. Can is Sajid downstairs or where is he?
I guess.
Could be.
Michael, are you saying you have access to these people?
They're out there. Deb keeps cornering them at events. I suggest we perhaps pursue their services.
So that's that's sort of the foundations you did.
Things with the name FreeBSD before and after it, which often have a lot of overlap as we've established. So yeah, because it's the developers that bump into it. Foundation may not even be aware of the issue, so someone has to help them be aware of it. I don't think they're telepathic, but.
Have you contacted the foundation about that before that talk?
Yes, about the specific one on DTS whatnot, not recently. That came up in the recent argument about GPL, but previously when, there was a spat about Netflix and their desires and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway. Go for, I'll spell it out as you see fit. These pertain to Beehive. We've had issues where reviewers were blown off and it's awkward. It sounds like we have a culture to improving all that. Great, let's have more of that.
Breaks until Warner is back.
Was there a problem theory?
A certain developer who fortunately left before being asked to leave was just kind of reckless with code from various sources.
And did somebody raise the issue somewhere?
And unfortunately, I believe Thor addressed it and asked that a commit be reverted. Okay. Anyway, issues seen out there? Votes to wait for Warner? Okay.
Or I assume we are since Hiroki-san is fiddling with a double.
Okay.
Here we go. I think
Hello?
Hello! Welcome back.
Oh, you're back.
You're back. Hey, I haven't moved. I got teeth, but
Hold on, I got two things going, and there's about to be feedback.
Kill one later. Quoting you, Warner, we briefly mentioned something seen in Beehive where it's like you're concerned with something was blown off, to use your words. I sincerely hope there's a culture of correcting developers when they're off the rails. That's all I ask. The person in question backed off before being asked to back off, and so far things are good, and healthy and productive. The right to be heard. I just humor yourselves and look at how Apache handles things, like even on their sub-projects, which are not legal entities, they're just sort of maybe under a fiscal sponsorship relationship like the FreeBSD Foundation, FreeBSD project is with the foundation. Opening statements like the most important participants in the project are the people who use our software. The majority of developers start as users and guide their development efforts to the user's perspective, blah, blah, blah. We do a lot of things right there. We do still have a few lingering attitude issues. I don't know. I hope we're all committed to welcoming users. What does that mean for developer summits? Should they be here? Should they not be here? Should they be open events? Should they closed events? I don't know. I personally, for a day job, work with end users who get to see the code long after it's left the project, gone through a storage-related product, and hit the user. And the user's never heard of FreeBSD when they try this NAS product. They don't know, they don't care, they're the people we really want, and they frequently get burned. And I can go into depth on those, but I've given several talks about that. Check the FreeBSDCon talks, etc. This one, okay, and I know you're going to disagree, Warner. So this was a statement on the developers mailing list. We had 5 code of conduct complaints that you had all directed against me. And the topic in the Pillars of Democracy is separation of powers.
And are you alleging I did something wrong?
When you had an outburst at an event, BSDCon, which many of us were present at, and people had concerns because, well, okay, when something like that happens, what is the person?
I did not participate in the adjudication of those concerns, sir. Are you saying I did something wrong? This really is sounding like a hatchet job on me, and I don't like it. Thank you.
Okay. You made us as a project look bad, which resulted in code of conduct complaints that I had nothing to do with. Now,
did you happen to see the mea culpa that I posted that said I was wrong to yell at Theo?
And we appreciate that.
What about all the times Warner has made the project look good?
So when we get to
Malt, and the whole thing was used by people who dislike the code of conduct to discredit the code of conduct, more than anything else.
now, the point here, maybe you'll agree, maybe you'll disagree. When you have a situation like this where we've received these and we think they're dubious, blah, 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 anything, whatever the circumstances are in the follow-up, there is one single person on the planet who should not be reporting that to the community, and that's the person subject to it.
I did not adjudicate any of these. The rest of the conduct board adjudicated these. The fact that I happened to write a summary, which was approved by the rest of the board, perhaps is a minor thing, but you're blowing this way out of proportion, and I fail to see the point you're trying to make here.
Right? Separation of roles. It's definitely complicated around here where when someone makes a statement of, you know, are you speaking as your employer? Is you speaking as a rando? Are you speaking as a user, developer, community, blah, 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 blah. It's tricky. I don't know if we could or should separate those. We'd be very careful when you raise your voice, use profanity, etc. Because it may be confusing which hat you're wearing at the time.
The only way to solve the multiple hats problem would be to have hundreds of more people and not need people to wear multiple hats.
Exactly.
Cool.
Well,
Sounds
let's
good.
have all these people in your pocket somewhere. I don't see how we solve. Is there a proposal to solve the problem?
Working really well with NBHIVE, where we brought the folks up to like 17 active developers, many of whom have come back. I think it's a question of inspiring people. And for example, back to the previous slide where donors and community members and new people really like seeing transparency and the rules that the project's following. You'll have to trust me on that.
Mean someone doesn't have to wear 2 hats because there's enough people there.
I'm not saying if they should or shouldn't, but when you have, for example, a code of conflict of interest policy, wearing those different hats becomes a non-issue because you say we follow these guidelines, we take these steps to...
You know, the code of conduct only works when people follow it. If people don't follow it and there's no enforcement mechanism, having all the rules in the world does you zero good.
I said conflict of interest, I corrected myself there.
So we should only.
If you don't trust the core team or some group to enforce things, and there's no other enforcement mechanism, what do a bunch of written rules, good do a bunch of written rules do? That's the whole basis with why the bylaws are as simple as they are. It's the whole basis. If we can't trust the core team, we as a project are screwed, is the complete basis of the bylaws.
Okay.
So,
Andrew.
to address something Warner said, you keep saying that that the rules are simple. Simple and complete are two completely independent things. And Michael has already said repeatedly that higher level of transparency attracts more users. So and it's been asked repeatedly, how do we get those extra users? The answer's already been provided. One way is a higher level of transparency. And then it circles around. This is one way. And then it keeps circling back around to why we care so much about transparency.
I think the difference is we all agree that transparency is important.
But no one seems to agree that putting work into transparency is important.
We're actively putting work into that transparency as just, if you look at the changes that have been made in the past year, there have been strides in that direction.
Yeah.
That transparency does take work, and as a person working on a big project that affects the entire community potentially, like, you have choices to make, right? Do I want to work on the code, or do I want to write a blog entry about like these things? So it's kind of like we have choices to make. And I'm not saying that we don't need to focus on those. We do. We absolutely. But it's also, we need to balance that. And I completely agree that transparency is very important to us getting new users. So I'm very happy to see the strides in these directions. Right? I do think we need to understand that none of these are things that are going to happen overnight. Right? We cannot do all of this work overnight. You're changing culture, you're changing lots of things at once, and we need to do it slowly and methodically. And I think one of the things that's nice about the project is, we've had this attitude of we don't have so many rules because we don't want to list out every single thing, but we also, do need to be reactionary to, okay, things have changed in whatever environment, whether it be societal norms or programming practices, what have you, and the rules need to change with those, but we need to be careful about. It's easy to be, fatalistic about these things. It's more important, in my opinion, that we focus on them, but they're not completely overshadowing everything else, because we do still have a project to run, right? We still have releases to push out. We still have day jobs. We still have whatever else is going on. But yes, we do need to keep these in mind and work towards them. I think it's important to understand the balance.
Yeah, but I think that there's I see in this room a lot of people saying, yeah, but why would we do that effort when we would be working on the code instead? I've heard that said several times. There's an underlying implication that the code is the most valuable thing of all. Which, although I agree that the code is valuable, a project without users does not exist.
And just
dictate where volunteers spend their time.
Well, yeah, I, for one, am profoundly grateful that other people deal with those things so that I don't have to. So that I get to just deal with the code and nothing else.
Amen. So if, with so much going well, I'm not disagreeing, how do we handle the knowledge transfer to the next core 5 years from now, and 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Other organizations write it down, and it works for them. So maybe we agree to disagree on the simple bylaws, nudge in the right direction, or a little more formality. I trust,
bylaws
allowed to disagree.
Of vote.
Right.
Of the interface.
Okay.
Every attempt to do so is failed.
Which proposals have been
There was a proposal to change the core team to be rotated into segments instead of all at once.
Okay.
So there would be more retained.
Who drove the efforts?
John Baldwin.
2 years ago.
No.
He's technically amazing, I'll say that. He is technically just
was not able to get.
stunning
it.
amazing. Okay.
Historically, we as committers have historically re-elected large segments of the core team.
Yes,
every time anyway.
I mean, the idea here was that they wouldn't have to choose to run.
Yes. Yes.
You know, many of them run away.
I would not object to such a change, but if it's been attempted before and has not gone
Things are different now.
Yeah, has not gone anywhere.
Someone other than John would have to do it, because John said he wouldn't try to.
Well,
Yeah. The proposal was place 3 people every year at the moment.
Right, but I'm saying I don't know that I think that much that to do connections of the I don't think it's enough value. Was it just John or were there others part of in that effort? Because that's a conversation we can have offline.
It was before I joined the project. So
Okay. John?
John doesn't like to talk about it.
I believe the vote failed because it didn't get enough votes.
We'd have to go to more archives to look at that.
Okay. Are those public?
So arguably, on the next.
There were public.
It's very, very difficult. It's actually the majority of developers. If I remember right, it's the majority, not a majority.
Okay.
In a core election, the voter turnout is 60 something.
Let's move on. Okay, that's a conversation to have in between individuals. I don't know. Profanity, locker room talk, bullying. Oh, I think they have chilling effects on the project. On developers, we probably each have our own definition, so I won't deep dive into any of that, but I don't know. I don't think our current code of conduct addresses just the nature of geeks who sometimes say mean things to each other about their work, but don't believe in them, and it's complicated. So I'm open to ideas on that. Wow, some of that hostility is on source SVN Hall. I'm not sure the people who said, okay, weren't you, have said things out there publicly that I really want out there publicly, especially as a representative core, you name it, et cetera, in the project. Because that's chilling to people involved who are just trying to follow in the technical discussions. Retort? I don't know.
Do you have to make the attack personal on me? I mean, is that your goal here? Why do you pick me specifically?
You've raised your voice
I
some
don't think that's an appropriate use of the time that we have here. And honestly, I don't know.
You're questioning my qualifications on any of this in front of the group, which you're welcome to do. You've also said that this is just my own attention-getting routine, which I will explain at length the steps I've taken over the years for the betterment of different projects. And you are a publicly elected figure. That's what comes with public representation. That's the dude with the goat going on.
But then you have to address the
Okay, fine, noted.
So, I've touched on authority versus leadership. Yeah, commit bits are awesome. We have very technical people. I didn't include quotations, but there's a bunch of hostility out there against those without commit bits, and that's the measurement of leadership, authority, and wisdom. I'd love to see that culture change. I don't know. How? The creation of the position of bidders was a very good step forward. Go ahead.
I was going to say, currently people that are asked to join the group as non-committers, but as you call them, friends of the project, are allowed some, yeah, I don't know.
Call out individual developers when they say chilling things that discourage participation, because developers abort silently, walk, and vanish, and I got to watch it firsthand with a project I care about within FreeBSD, Beehive. So yeah, value leadership, find out whatever mechanisms help that happen. And in that context of like, oh, you know, hey, source bit, oh, that matters. People, coding's hard. Everyone's made mistakes. My hero, one of my heroes, John Baldwin, created the #1 bug that drove me in the ground for years with my clients over the Telbeer issue. There's always more room for improvement on review, and be humble, be terrified to commit. Many are, a few handful aren't. I don't know. I don't know what mechanisms or coaching or leadership or you name it, mentorship will help that. But we've had problems. Let's hope we'll never ever have another problem again. I'll leave it at that. Then the question came up from folks like Ed and asked, are we losing developers? I don't know, but I'm bringing them back on a weekly basis, and they're delivering very good goods within the Beehive project. A developer not turning in their commit bit doesn't mean they haven't left. There's no obligation to participate or not participate, but do be conscious of who's gone silent and who is of value, and ask them why they've gone silent. Maybe they'll have some wisdom for you. And again, developers have worked silently. They'll just say, okay, I don't have time for this. At best, you get eye rolling when chilling statements are made or otherwise. This one's good. We waited 30 minutes for service. So, developer taking out is something I hear a lot about. Are there proposals from core to address that? And brushing it off like, who has more time? Well, no, there are ways to motivate developers.
Is it just core?
I'm sorry, was that a question for me?
To the audience.
If you're the one that's presenting, you have a proposal to help with this? Do you have something specific? Do you have something concrete? Do you have something actionable? Do you have perhaps a policy that core could vote on? Do you have any of these things? Or is it just all innuendo and personal attacks?
Well, when I suggest we look at the Apache guidelines, that was a direct suggestion. When I said I suggested we have a conflict of interest policy, that's a specific one or maybe to choose from.
Actionable item. It is vague and it's like, it's not helpful, Michael.
Are there any other opinions on that? What's your opinion?
I think look at an item and determine how it affects us is perfectly actionable. I don't see how it's not.
If the goal is to change our policy to be more like the Apache one, then someone would draft it and propose it rather than say, people should go read this.
Okay, I'm reaching out from one person to 2 to 3 to 4, and this was an opportune time that came up where people with very good experience and very good knowledge and many hats in the project are available. You are fully welcome to agree or disagree, and that's what I want this conversation to have. And I think there's more to it than send a final proposal to core and see what happens, because you have to get to that final step and start somewhere, and I'm starting here. You can fault me for that or not, it's up to you. Timeouts, privacy, thank you, Werner, for mentioning GDPR requirements in your report earlier. That's awesome. There are many EU citizens in the room. What do we do if someone wants to be forgotten from FreeBSD? Do we have the mechanisms to do that? Can we? What are our obligations? What are not our obligations? It's an organization, yes, we have obligations. Private.
I guess we don't put that in the core report here because we're forgetting.
Let's talk about privacy.
People's forms and stuff.
Right. I don't think it's. Sorry?
I guess we don't put the people's names and so on in the core report when they ask to be forgotten.
Okay.
So I don't know that we report how many people we've forgotten.
Okay. I made sure of forgetting you. Forget forgotten.
I do remember reading either in a core report or somewhere else that means someone reporting, we have deleted persons who wanted to be forgotten according to the group.
Okay.
We can't change
Excellent.
the list, but we will delete your forum account if that's what you're asking.
So
we have a verification mechanism so that somebody can't ask me to delete your forum account.
how do we, what mechanisms, I'm open to ideas, and I think there's value in a dialogue as opposed to the end result without any process to get there. How do we never show up on Phoronix or Splashdot or whatever again with leaked comments from developers, private mail, etc.?
How do you do that?
You can't. We send them to a large number of people.
Yeah,
There's no way
okay.
to stop those people from misusing them.
It's the internet.
Argue that if we have less private communication on developers, there would be less stuff to leak.
I like that idea. Can you repeat it?
You can argue that there, and it's something that comes up regularly, there are more things on developers that should perhaps be public rather than all developers. But it's a comparatively small problem.
Okay.
on the other hand, those things are not the ones that would end up on Veronic's sort of flash.
Well, yeah. The thing is, honestly, you can't go through life worrying what idiots on forums will say.
Yeah, well,
Of course, and you know, with
I mean,
companies
this is the same, like a company, I mean, they can tell you you're not allowed to it, and they can, at least we can probably fire you for it. But they can't do very much else if you are leaking somewhat private conversations. For instance, the CEO of a company sends out that this has happened, and you leak it out that it has happened before. And it's actually part of, I mean, there are ways to anonymously contact news agencies to, for instance, report about weird things going on in at least government agencies and probably private companies as well. So stopping leaks is impossible. And trying will only make it worse.
Well, nothing to do.
Hold on. You said it yourself. Transparent communication can't be leaked. There's nothing to leak because it's out there in the first place.
But some,
Yeah, but some communications
Also showing up on forums.
So there's a number of threads on the Linux kernel mailing list that wind up on Fironix, and that's 100% public.
Oh, okay.
So we would have a thread in FreeBSD hackers that winds up on Fironix.
Okay, it could happen. I'm just advocating transparency. I'm a fan.
but how do you balance transparency versus privacy?
There are key questions when executive session and other similar mechanisms are required to discuss sensitive topics. No question whatsoever. I think we can do better on transparency. I'll leave it at that. I'm grateful that Core is reporting that they're doing better. Yay, better late than never. Hooray. Go more, please. Awesome. Donors will reward it. Trust me. So, developer challenges. We face timeouts. We face unconstructive criticism, undisclosed duplication of efforts. I watched people work on the same thing, not knowing each other were working on the same thing. One gets really frustrated when they learn that, oh, well, what hell am I doing this? I was, like you said, hope that someone else does the work I want done. So, I don't know if we should internally blog more about what we're working on. Do we have mechanisms? Should we have
The
them?
downside to that, though, somebody else is working on it, I won't, and then they run out of time and never finish it, and it never gets done.
They should reach out to each other and communicate, review each other's
Yeah,
work. It's
maybe
pretty
form
awesome.
a working group or something.
Cool, great, and I hear those are coming, yay. Took time,
I've been here for years, we're just encouraging more.
I've been doing the practice working group for a year, and we had one going a couple of years ago as well that died down because people didn't have time. But I mean, this has been going on for over a year.
Great.
It's not new, and I think other working groups have been going on for even longer.
Excellent. Are they generally driven by one individual who moderates discussions, or?
I can also
Normally by people that make technical contributions.
Pardon?
I said normally people that are involved in making technical contributions, find them and participate.
Great, yay.
I can also put one I'm part of.
Great. Great. Quick one bonus, check your spelling. Did a survey go out and did it have like typos? Just check your spelling.
Oh,
So-
please, this is the core secretary you're bashing now. I mean, everyone makes
Yeah,
mistakes and typos.
It's one thing to bash me, but don't you bash Joseph, man.
I mean, I make typos in commit messages.
We all have, no
Everyone-
That
question.
was on your slides.
When we are a public representative on a board, there is a higher standard one is held to. That's kind of how it works.
But still
We have more
mistakes
than that.
happen the more, I mean, we check our core reports, there's still errors in there.
Okay, I'm just suggesting we all work to be better at that. It's a good
Of
thing.
course, we
Ask-
try.
Yay!
Ask any author how many times they check through their votes, and still mistakes slip through.
Yeah, you find your typo 30 seconds after you publish.
You hand in your thesis, you find 50 things that are wrong.
Are they generally when peer reviewed, just say, hey, buddy, can you
Yes.
check this out? It happens, let's all try to be better. I've done it, we've all done it. If we're in a publicly elected position, try to be a little better than the rest of us. Just saying. Anyway.
Weren't you saying earlier that elitism was a problem? We should not strive to be better than everybody else, therefore. I'm confused about the point you're making.
Okay. Well, elitism versus checking spelling. A public office I would hope does not represent elitism. I don't know, it is a public face of the organization, is a public representative by nature. Let's just all try to check our spelling, and I'll do my best to check mine. Is that controversial? Okay. Little things about working with developers, and I am wrapping up, I swear. Yeah. Organizations sabotage themselves when they drive off developers in subtle ways, active ways, block them waiting, and they're not simple challenges, I get that, but the link, which is out there, and I'll get the slides out there, they have some very good points on how to work with volunteers, and this is volunteer heavy. You rolled your eyes, Alan.
Well, some of this stuff doesn't translate the same to open source as it does to, you know, a regular nonprofit with volunteers. There's a job description for being in council. You don't have certain responsibilities just because you decided to volunteer. It's a different one. It's different than volunteering for the SPCA or something.
Fair enough. I'll let, for the time of expedience, allow you to read those separately. Be kind and respectful. I know this right as a hatchet job. You're welcome to feel that way. Sorry about that.
You're sorry that I feel a certain way, Michael? Really?
We will agree to disagree on certain points. Anyway,
it's toxic and not helpful to communicate with people like that. I'm just going to end it here because my blood pressure is way too high and I got to get to bed. And my wife has texted me 4 times. What the hell is going on down there? It's bad for your blood pressure. So good night.
good night. Okay, I have described some steps. Andrew, thank you for pointing out that there are some steps there that go into like maybe 2 people would be on 1 person, maybe 3 if we're really lucky. What are the downsides of this approach? What are the downsides of adopting a project-wide conflict of interest policy that just is put out there for the public to view and see that we're committing to such things?
The obvious one I'm pointing out is that there is a cost to actually doing these things. Doing anything costs something.
Okay.
So we do have to actually put the effort.
Brad won't sign the contributor license agreement for Google. Why would he sign a conflict of interest waiver or something for the project?
He's not signing code over the conflict of interest policy, but
It's still a legal thing that he's trying to sign.
You're
It
speaking for
actually
Brad.
wouldn't work. I'm using Brad as an example of somebody who doesn't want to sign things.
does Brad not want to sign a conflict of interest policy?
I don't know. Generally, my answer would be no.
Okay. You're entitled
Just
to
straight
that.
up, right? Like,
And granted, the project couldn't have him sign something anyway because the project doesn't exist. It's not, the project is not really a thing.
But it has a bunch of rules, onboarding rules.
Okay. But question as well, because by the people have access to the machines.
Say
That's
Brad is
exactly it.
advancing his employer's
Yeah,
interest.
it's up to us.
But no, that's exactly it. The fact that the project
Half of us
doesn't
get
exist in legal
paid to
context
work
is
over
completely irrelevant. It doesn't
They have an interest in this.
It does exist, and you can say,
Oh,
yes, the
small.
FreeBSD project exists because there's a FreeBSD operating system, so therefore, there's existence is proven. And if the FreeBSD project has a bunch of rules listed saying this is how we handle conflicts, legal or not, mob rule kicks in, and that's how it's done. That's democracy. Slightly more codified mob rule.
Well, so, as someone who, the other open source project I work on is OSGeo, so Open Source Geospatial Consortium.
Okay.
OSGeo is incredibly formal about this process. All the things you're talking about.
Are they a legal nonprofit or anything?
Yes.
Okay.
They have little subsidiary nonprofits for each of their projects, they use for everything. And the reason they work that way is some of the companies they deal with won't deal with that kind of entity. And what I'll say as a developer is there are certain things that can be incredibly helpful with. Because say a legal question, they know exactly who to go to and say, hey, how do we deal with this? On the other hand, they're slow. They're possibly the slowest project I've ever worked with.
Okay.
And that's not from not having computers. It's it's not from not having technical expertise. It's that going through the layers of that system has a cost.
Bureaucracy.
Right,
You're
and
on.
what I've
Fair enough.
noticed in OSPO is the developers in that project know that things take a while, but can't put their finger on exactly why. And so I think they just know that this stuff's time consuming. And so it's interesting to me to watch this. FreeBSD is very much in the other direction. That, you know, a private message to one person and something can be fixed in 10 minutes from now. And so it's interesting working the two extremes of that. You know, but I think it's important to remember that when you formalize that process, the best way to describe it is you're also adding some friction, just everything that happens. Because now, let's say with conflict of interest, if there's a change that say improves performance for a Netflix use case, and we go, okay, with this piece of code, it's going to make things work better. But because of conflict of interest policy, someone else needs to look at this. Because this is Netflix specific. And so are we making sure this doesn't hurt someone else? Even if that change is completely neutral, it now takes longer to do. Maybe the project never sees it because one goes, you know what, I'm going to fix my problem today, put in a little internal set of patches, and go about it. And so I think it's balancing the transparency that helps people engage with the project with not having so much overhead that it's just discouraging. And so it's
Every organization on the planet faces that, do they not?
absolutely.
Okay,
And I think that's what
we'll have to
the whole kind of
find what works
conversation-
for us.
I do think it should be pointed out that there are different levels of this though.
Right.
You don't have to have a conflict of interest policy that says every single commit from a corporate committer must be reviewed. You can just accept them and only bring them back up. if something
It's certainly
complains.
a gradient where you can have everything from nothing at all to massive committee review of every single thing that happens.
No question.
And so,
But there's a gradient between
Right,
micromanagement
there's a
and
vast
anarchy. Yes, there's a gradient, no question.
my impression as a contributor, not a committer, at this entire thing, is that it seems like the discussion that actually needs to happen are what are the specifics. Because that's where this whole concept works for us. I mean, I've come in and out of the project for 20 years. And one of the reasons I don't deal with committing and all of that is the community responsibility involved in that. It's not a legal problem. It's a, well, shit, if I write this piece of code and people use it, I'm going to have to make sure it keeps working. You know, for me, that's what keeps me from pushing to being committed.
And it's, sorry to interrupt, but it's extremely amusing that I think that rule is not actually written down anywhere.
No.
But it's one of those things we all feel anyway, is as I have committed this, I am somehow
I am now
responsible for it.
The breaking you up, right?
And I think it's very difficult for a project to find that happy medium. And so at this point, it seems like what really needs to happen are those specifics where they say, okay, you know, what does a, say, conflict of interest policy for FreeBSD look like? What's a specific one?
Yeah.
And then we can go into that and say, well, this is going to be way too much work, or this is going to be, you know, this isn't going to cover this. You know, that way we can have those discussions and actually figure out what it is. I think because most of the disconnect in that entire discussion wasn't around the principles of like transparency or anything. Everyone's great with that. It's around implied details. It's like, okay, now if we take all of this and it becomes something specific, we can go through and improve it and come up with something that the community can actually
Very tempted to suggest that, you know, every rule we have, be it explicit or implicit or a code of conduct or a conflict of interest issue, they all come with a certain cost. The fact that we're arguing about it now rather than about how are we going to make it around finished package base.
Oh, we can look at that.
So there is a cost to them. So I would think, well, I would suggest that perhaps what we want to do is go, when we have specific problems with something, when we can look at specific cases and go, yes, this went wrong. Here, Scale Engine committed something that was very specific for their use case, and it broke the Netflix use case. I'm sorry to pick on Alan, but he's Canadian and he'll just take it. Once we have a specific case of this is where it went wrong, maybe it's easier to discuss how do we prevent this from recurring. And one of the things that I think that we can do better, but it is more from a technical perspective than from a conflict of interest thing, is we should be a lot more emphatic about reviewing things. We do some of it, but not enough of it. The OpenBSD people just consistently review everything. We don't. The Linux people consistently review everything.
Well, I think being explicit about when something is reviewed, one of the interesting problems that I've in the past is you'll have something that breaks something for me. And you go, oh, well, I thought someone. And you go and dig into it all the time. Well, no, I never, so.
The reviews are also not fixed for everything, because I have reviewed the recent change and it did break something, and neither the committer nor myself had seen it. But it would help.
That goes back to the cap.
Well,
We've all broken stuff. I've probably broken, a third of the course at one point. Because it's all
right.
I'm pure as pure as
And so Brooks published the beginnings of a review policy to try to guide more and more things to be reviewed. But we can't just make it a rule that everything has to be reviewed, because we haven't scaled up the review capacity in FreeBSD yet to the level where everything could be reviewed.
We have committers that refuse to use Fabric.
Yes.
I think that pendulum is shifting, and that's fantastic, but we're never going to get there, right?
Right. They can review it other ways too, but there's just some cases where there's not someone to easily identify who to review. There are too many exceptions to the rule that everything needs to be reviewed. So it doesn't make sense to use a rule, but we're trying to get the culture to be.
Yeah, well, we basically have to. There is no way to go from where we are now to everything gets reviewed in one step. No, that can't be done, and if we try, we're going to lose half of our commitments.
On the other hand, you could bring that to that point where
Yes.
you say, that can clean up people who can do the user and that can do the user.
And if nothing else, anyone who agrees with me that more reviews are a good thing, post your patches for review. You will be surprised at who looks at them and comments on them, because even my PF patches attract more attention than well, I'm great stuff. So the problem is that I can't always use things. I have a review for a bridge code, and I don't know. And I don't know, it looks vaguely correct to me. I suppose you know what you're doing is not necessarily a useful review.
If someone wants you to review something, for instance, in Marty as a reviewer fabricator, and you don't know that, just that I don't know about it, that's
Or even design to review.
I think one thing to take out of this though is we want more reviews, but we can't get more reviews in one step.
Yes.
So what's the step before getting more reviews?
Well, it was my suggestion of, anyone who agrees with me that more reviews would be good should be posting many more patches for review.
One thing I do want to point out is, let's go one step further back. We go to policy. Where's that policy? Do people know where it is? Can they find it? Can they follow it?
Yes.
Because my bone to pick is ports. If you're trying to get some patches pushed into ports, as a non-committer, it is an absolute tire fire. And if you want new committers, new committers, I'm going to go out on a limb here and make a sweeping assumption that 90% of people coming into the project are going into ports going into the source code. I think the amount of people who are like, ooh, I'd like to help out by patching something in the source code are very, very small. Whereas people who are like, oh, there's a buggy rc.conf script here. let me fix that.
Yeah.
And then go and suffer through the hell that's trying to get something committed to court,
Very well.
and then it disappear.
When it's topic specific here,
I've actually tried to reach
Set your
almost
page
100
repeat out when you do shoot these open boards,
for this. And my conclusion I've come to after over a year of doing this is the correct way to get court change made is throw it over, do something, throw it over the wall, and then scream on the mailing list until someone doesn't know to shut you up.
Have you brought this to port manager? Because that's
I
the,
mean, who is port manager and where do I find them? But why should I be a port manager? Where does it tell me?
because that's the arbiter for these kinds of things.
Right.
Sure, I'm gonna tell him forward sucks.
No, you don't. That won't get you anywhere.
I agree, but
You say, I have this problem, I have this point, I want it committed, I got
So-
these rejections, why is that, can you help me out? Or,
no, it's not like a rejection, it's like getting ignored.
Yeah,
And then you ask port
then
manager,
you
hey,
ask port
can you make
manager, hey,
it?
yeah, can you put this forward? That's the people you go to.
And I've got one patch submitted.
That's, I mean, you get, it
It's faster to
doesn't
scream
matter how
commentary.
small this patch is.
It's faster to scream on the tag.
Warner is very specific.
That's why we have this
Uh,
project.
What do you think on all this?
But I'm
But what I'm
pulling the atomic moment. Is there something you want to
There
know?
are some procedures that
This has
exist.
become an open discussion, and you are going to probably a lot of trouble in late night to do this.
Clear, concise, most.
I'm actually right, so it's good.
And also somewhere we have to change that and address that.
And no, but
Hey,
one little thing.
Hey.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, so, I will personally be of the opinion that open discussion on some of these topics is a healthy thing. Is there anyone here who would like to take this from one person being a lightning rod and taking it to 2 or 3 who would like to discuss some of these topics further and the frustrations developers have had and the cultural issues and you name it? 'Cause why aren't we as big as Linux? Was it the lawsuit? Was it, why didn't Delphix choose FreeBSD? Do we know, Alan? I'm curious.
Because they can hire more Linux.
Okay, valid point. There you go. How do we change that? How do we grow our base that we have? They are finding FreeBSD folks when searching for Unix type development. What strategies work and which ones can we implement? Hold on a minute.
How do we quantify patterns?
Okay, you two. Benedict first.
Have we somewhere written down that we want to beat Linux at all? Is there a written rule that I haven't read yet?
About beating Linux?
Yeah? Is that a project
No, we
goal?
don't. It's not a popularity contest. I'll grant you that. There's some very successful, well-funded open source organizations. I hope we can be more like some of them in popularity and awareness, and I totally get the strappiness of a bunch of us at a table at a conference and getting the word out, which is awesome. I don't know if there's structural changes we want to consider. I don't know. I want to know what works and then document what works so we never repeat the slowdowns we've experienced. That's why I think it's healthy to have rules that are enforced, just simple ones and then clear ones. And yes, some have come up, but I've also heard this thing that can't have guiding rules because keep it simple because it's a virtual organization, despite people going to a lot of trouble to go around the world to present and go to Detroit, etc. Go ahead.
You asked about when people bring up social things and some of the same stuff. And we talked a little bit about that earlier, but going back to saying where it has to be, it seems like from here when we start talking about what do people want to do, whether that's a policy thing we want or it's it's a cultural thing about that. What are these goals? With say with Linux, it's okay. Do we want more developers than Linux? Is that something in the previous project?
Or what are the reasons why people contribute to FreeBSD?
Right.
What motivates them?
I think part of this is simply there's a whole lot of implied knowledge in this conversation where people don't believe exactly the same things, and it seems like a lot of the disconnects, intention, and that sort of thing are actually coming from that not being explicit. From that not being explicit.
The disconnects being coming from not being explicit that we have clear goals.
Right. But we have specific goals, and what is it specifically? What are we trying to? If we talk with bylaws, as an example, if we come up with a draft of what that is, I think it's a lot easier to then have a conversation about which things are good and bad.
Okay.
So, I guess my thing would be how to translate it into something concrete that most people learn.
Is there anyone here who would like to participate in making things more concrete, exploring challenges we're facing and opportunities, etc.?
I'm happy to.
Remind me of your name?
Harrison Grundy.
I want to see the name on his badge, so he's not even giving you a favor.
I appreciate that. Anyone
I'll
else?
get you in the project, damn it.
Does anyone have harsh words for me? I've received a few, but fortunately in this whole process, it's been like 3 or so people who are really vocal against it, and then a lot of sympathetic people. So that reflects on one of us in that those little relationships.
Not against it, I was expecting more of the concrete things, like.
It's going from step 1 to step 2, 1 person to 2 people, and maybe 3. I think it sounds like a 3. That's awesome.
If there's a problem and it helps them be identified, like, do you believe there was a conflict of interest somewhere that means that we should have a conflict of interest rule?
I'm very well with the optics outside of this project, and that there are expectations in the community that the community rewards such guidelines.
The politicians are expected to, I don't know about every other country in the world, but in Australia, our politicians are expected to live by a code of conduct and expectations from the community in regards to declaring their conflicts of interest. And if they don't declare it, then they're in the shit.
Okay.
Is it possible to have a conflict of interest with the FreeBSD project?
I'll welcome other answers before I share my opinion.
I think this is the cart before the horse thing. It's not that we need a conflict of interest policy because there's conflicts of interest. We need a conflict of interest policy because people want us to have it.
Also, there are inherently conflicts of interest.
And
The fact that something happens with them or not is irrelevant. You know, it's certainly every single committer who works for a company, which is the vast majority of them, there is some level of conflict of interest inherent in that activity.
And with those come declarations of those interests. Do we have those? I don't know.
Would those violate the GPDR?
Declaration of a conflict of interest? Any Europeans
If
in
you
the
have
room?
to list, what does the Apache one say here? Every place you work for, everything your spouse receives money for.
Spouse?
The Apaches is.
The Apache one is specifically for the board of directors, not for everybody who's part of the project, and so it's probably stricter than.
I'm talking from the bottom up, not the top down.
What is that?
That means we have,
So every committer has to tell us who they work for?
no, core is a good start. It has no bylaws to, the foundation has the most strict legal requirements. They literally have bylaws that must be submitted with an application to become a 501c3 nonprofit.
I'm not on the foundation.
So how far should this go? How far should I let my pants down for the stuff that I do? For the foundation, for core, for project? How far do you want me to disclose everything I do and what kind of interests I apparently have? Just to get an idea of how the frame should be.
For my benefit, it seems like you're suggesting that a conflict of interest policy for developers would somehow improve the prospects for the project. Is that the assertion that you're making throughout this talk?
It's one example. I've found that a little sunlight goes a long way. More transparent communications makes people hesitate in the things they say that might be not welcome on the outside. Knowing that there are more of these policies that
interest.
Pardon?
I said transparency is not to be confused with conflict of interest, right?
It's one example of these steps. The extreme example of the Apache one has been given. So, Benedict, to answer your question, primary employment relating to FreeBSD, I suppose, is the one that's on the question of how does what work, not your wife's work, not my wife's candle business, I don't think will impact participation in the project. Gentle would be the answer. Good start to show the public that we have a commitment to such types of guidelines, like so many others do. Yes, no.
Do you think that would increase participation, though?
We've had statements from
mandatory
people other than
lawyers
myself
don't
that
increase
donors like
litigation.
that kind of stuff.
But the project doesn't have donors, the foundation does.
Correct, that is a technically legal distinction, yes. When one wants to give money to the FreeBSD thing, community, they go to the foundation. If you're saying they're totally separate, I would argue no, they have a relationship that I described earlier.
Should we like to show up and talk to, I mean, see stop or be interrupted?
I apologize for that.
There's a real important difference here in terms of fiduciary. If you're in the foundation and on a board of directors, you actually have a fiduciary to the organization. In the case of the FreeBSD project, there is no fiduciary. And I think that that's really important, and I'm not sure that that's well understood.
I don't know if it's well understood to the public that there is that clear separation. When they hear FreeBSD, they hear one thing.
Not people within the project or even inside the foundation. Like it's something that the foundation has to worry about because they carry a legal liability, and that's the end of that. Like that's why the foundation has lawyers in order to advise them of that. Everybody else, that's just conjecture and immaterial.
Yes, Manu.
Could you give a concrete example of conflict of interest? Let's say I'm still at Dundee and I'm also in court. What would be my conflict of interest? And let's say I'm also at the foundation on...
Sure, lots of hats. Yeah, so the question is, what's an example of a possible conflict? That your employment, paid work on FreeBSD is only in the best interest of your employer and potentially is at the detriment of other users of the software. And we had earlier about the graphics update, we removed working drivers. The word working, and I'm not saying that this specific example was driven by a corporation wanting to screw the user, but if that were to happen in service of a company, it is a detriment to all users.
Again, that assumes that the code's not open, for instance, and that we can't review the work product that goes into the project, or don't review the work product that goes into the project.
Yeah. Under ideal circumstances, absolutely everything is reviewed, and through a complex system, that's definitely getting better. I'm not questioning that at all.
Specifically, the driver, since I was involved. I mean, that was on a review for half a year before it was done. We didn't want to do a very bad job of it because we wanted to get it done before fall, and I was on vacation, and blah, 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 blah. But other than that, I mean, people knew it was coming. We waited half a year before announcing it. Or we waited half a year after announcing it before we actually got rid of it.
Okay.
And we provided alternatives. You can get alternatives. And you said to yourself, I mean, I assume you're running FreeBSD on your laptop.
Yep.
So at least something in that regards work.
Yes, what do you think?
And sorry if I'm jumping on that, but I've had that hit on my head multiple times, so.
I understand. Yeah. Well, there have been issues fortunately now resolved. They should. IPv6, I know at least one user in the room had issues with IPv6 and 12. Let's digest this. Send me your love mail, hate mail, questions, ideas. I'll talk to the two folks that have stepped forward because I think we have a similar experience on the periphery of the project, trying to get closer and been zapped and kept at arm's length for various reasons. Some of it's cultural, some of it's technical, it's a few others. I don't know. Anything else from the group? Please, Fred.
I think this comes from a place of caring, and I think that's very important. And so I appreciate the points you're trying to make. I do think we need to separate it into different, I don't want to say different talks, but almost different topics, right? Like there's more. Yeah, I think there needs to be a lot more focus because it's. FreeBSD has always been a community of less governance is more. Right.
Cool. I will not disagree.
And I'm not saying that that's good or bad or you know, things have changed, right? Like, and I think generally I agree with you that we need to have more. I don't think that needs to be a lot more, but I do think we should, you know, turn the knob from 2 to 3 or whatever, right? Like it should step up.
Zero disagreement.
But I think that a lot of this is, as someone that has never seen this before, so I don't know what the beginning stuff is about, but it seems to me that we need to come towards this from a place of like, here are concerns, here are some potential examples, and here are some suggestions. Because it seems like it's, you know, you told me to go read the Apache guidelines, and I'm already like, sorry, no. Like,
And you had a very personal experience with that badge, and that's valuable feedback.
Right.
That's very valuable. You're like some artist people, I know, it's awesome. So, can we go? Yeah, when you're done.
So I think we need to kind of slice this up into maybe like 4 separate things, so that we can talk about more specifics. I do agree that like we could use it seems like what you're saying is we could use some guidance and I don't want to say rules or whatever, but some direction to say like, if X happens, we have, you know, this rule that says we should do Y. Like you're talking about the core bylaws that, you know, removing someone from core. So that's an example where we already have that, but it seems like you're getting at things where, you know, this could happen, maybe we should think about having a rule to prevent that when it does happen. And so that's where I think a lot of people are going to put on the brakes that have been in the community for a long time, where we've had less is more governance. And I think there's a lot of sensitivity around that with people that, like, I feel really overwhelmed. I have so many hours in the day. I spend a lot of my free time working on FreeBSD and trying to make it better. Right? Like I said, I have all 5 commitments. I didn't get those by accident.
We thank you for it.
Twitter and package.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
Electric.
I have 3 then.
Nice. So, wait, 2 more to go. That happened because I care about FreeBSD a lot, and I use it as a cohesive thing, and so I started fixing in various places, right? And I know we have a ton of problems, right? Your ports update, their patch is the perfect example. You know, but I think we have to be very conscious of what we ask volunteers to do. And I think that's where you're getting a lot of negative feedback, because it's very easy for you to say, go read the Apache governance documents. That's an hour worth of my time.
Understood. Okay, no, fair enough. That's a very...
And not to say that you shouldn't, but I think you need to maybe pre-digest some of it and condense and say like, here's a paragraph from the Apache bits that I think is valuable that maybe we can borrow.
Which is precisely why I gave this example of the user comes first. Let's find that. And I copied out one extreme, very specific quotation for that reason.
Yeah, I remember
Did
that.
I not?
I completely agree with that example, and that's why I'm working on package base.
But it's
not for me, but because I think our users are going to be the ones that benefit from that the most.
So is that saying that every user gets to vote in the Apache whatever?
No. It's
other than being a nice sentiment, what is it saying?
Yeah.
We've had quality control regressions that have thoroughly burned lots of those clients. And how do we prevent that? No, we don't, but there are mechanisms to prevent that. And somehow a regression is when stuff works and then stops working.
Right.
We like working.
We have in mind that anything you do to prevent regressions, and I agree that they're bad, but they all come with an associated cost.
Okay.
Every step that you take to try to prevent regression potentially costs you future patches.
Future patches and future users, as I've seen in the wild?
Yes, but not having the new features also potentially costs you users. So everything here is a balancing act.
Agree completely.
So you do need to be very careful about where you go with this.
I love how Brad put it about notching from 2 to 3, not 2 to 50.
Yes, but to do that, you have to turn some other valve down to get it, right? It's zero sum.
I disagree.
You can create more motivation to create some amount of
Yeah,
more
no.
effort, but not infinite more effort. Right? If we make it better FreeBSD, it will be a slower evolving FreeBSD. Maybe that's acceptable, but
You're put that, you're simply that, making changes and stay down, and when you're doing that, you want to ensure that people feel that what they are looking at is still recognized. You know, that the person that actually is nothing, but they will, look at that makes sense.
There's, we all want to work together. That's why we're here.
And you do, by the way.
Yes. Right. I think we need to, it's coming across that you're making, it sounds like to me that you're making assertions that, you know, what we're doing is bad and we should be here. But I think we need to come up with a, like, let's talk about developer productivity, right? That's a huge thing. And, you know, pull requests and various other mechanisms that we don't use today, and code review that we're embracing slowly are great things, but we can't force people to do any of that. And you talked about how people have left the project.
We can inspire them, and I see a routine that
Oh,
it can
absolutely.
be done. And there are ways to not just
I
drive them
completely
off.
agree with you.
Awesome.
I completely agree with you, but you cannot force it, right? Is what I'm saying. When the fabricator was first introduced, I would have bet you money that if we pulled the project, just the developer community, and said, if we forced you to use Fabricator, would you leave the project? I would guarantee you 50% or more would have said yes, right?
Okay. Fair enough.
It's been years. I think that has shifted more in the right direction,
Right.
in a positive direction, but I still think we're gonna get to a, you know, currently, we're still at the point where we would lose a large number of committers if the answer was, you know, if we said, yes, we're gonna require a review.
I'd argue counterpoint that you convince them of the value, and if they're logical people who are capable of coding, which is really hard with the brain cells pushed around, they will
I agree, but it's-
gladly follow you.
It all comes down to time, right? Like, how much time do you have, how much free time do you have to contribute to the project? If I spend 10% of my time dealing with overhead, that's a manageable amount of my time, of my FreeBSD time. If I spend 50% of my FreeBSD time with overhead, I'm probably lost.
Absolutely valid point. And
so
point taken.
So that's where
Streamlining is awesome, is what you're saying.
What's that?
Streamlining is a good thing.
Yes.
Any kind of bureaucracy should just be
Right,
efficient.
we want to streamline, but we also want to make improvements, and I don't think we can force those improvements, right? We can do what we did with Fabricator, right? We can turn it on, make it available, and slowly it's gotten more and more used. And then maybe eventually when it's, you know, the number of people that say that they're just going to leave the project if it's required is, you know, single-digit percentages, we say, sorry, you know, we really want to encourage this, we're going to make it a requirement, you know, here's a bunch of technical reasons, and if that's not enough for you, thank you for your service in the past, we hope you change your mind and come back in the future, we would love to have you as a leader. But we have to be very conscious of, this is a huge, we're talking about huge culture shift items. We're talking about huge, like, mental shift items, right? And granted,
Our developers don't follow one single model. We're giving assumptions of them. Some are government contractors, and they are so bureaucracy covered that they think this is great, this is awesome. You know, this is wow. And sometimes we're concerned that you don't have enough. Because wow, there's value. Because let's not assume about developers. They come in all shapes and forms.
exactly. And so we have to balance this and slowly move in these directions. Right? Like there's huge polarizing topics like subversion versus Git or whatever, right? And so I think it's important to not talk about tooling. It's important to talk about specific problem areas, right? Workflow, like if your workflow looked like this and never mentioned subversion versus Git, right? Like that's how I think we talk about this.
Okay. Okay.
So So I think we need to dig more into these topics and identify, like, here are some examples. You know, there are obviously more, but having a list of goals of, say, like, here are 10 things we could change. You know, let's pick the top 2 that we think are the most important, and then we can start whittling away at those 2 over the next 2 years, and then, you know, we have a new list of 10 and pick the next top 2, or, right? Like, it's just something that we have to do iteratively, right? I mean, this is software development. It should all be iterative, whether it's
Beautifully put.
code of conduct or the
Beautifully put.
the software.
Be iterative. Other feedback? Anyone have top frustrations as participants in the project? I don't want to name these hats and roles, etc.
What do you mean there, Mark?
Pardon?
What do you mean?
What's been most? We're all here because we love this operating system and its derivatives. Yay! Any pet peeves, pet top concerns of any individuals who want to speak forward?
Andrew. I have one on Brad, he's not doing enough PKG based.
Is my friend vote for it yet?
Is my friend vote for it?
Yes? We produce images and you haven't even tried them.
It's part of a bigger view that anything to do with ports is documented in the worst way possible.
Ports documentation?
Ports documentation is,
What kind, you mean the?
I know polite words to say on it.
You mean the
Well,
port
just
handbook?
one port, and where do you find the URL to check out the port string with SVN? I don't think I found
The only way you can do it is find a URL to SVN web and change SVN web to SVN. That's the only way
you basically
it's somewhere in the
clicking
porter's
around until you
handbook.
find the right
myself.
It is somewhere in the porter's handbook, but I'm not reading.
Oh, you're talking about ports, okay.
Ports. Yeah, it is somewhere in the
I thought
porter's
about
handbook.
That's
That's an
for
awful
docs.
lot.
As
Does the quick start for docs have the SVN URL?
The docs, yes, there's the quick start.
As someone working with ports, you're kind of expected to at least give them the
Yeah,
ports.
how do you
No.
first? Yeah.
This is not someone who's working with ports.
Okay.
This is someone who uses ports and has a patch he would like to hand, he would like to toss back upstream as a nice member of the community.
Was that a barrier to entry for you?
Huge.
Is that just you or everyone else?
Well, I'm fairly familiar with FreeBSD and how it works and how to find things.
That's
And
okay.
so if I ran into that problem, I don't think I'm the only one.
Okay, so we should fix that, definitely.
And
This is so, I mean,
my point was that this isn't just where do I find the SVN URL so I can make a patch.
Yeah.
It extends to every piece of the ports documentation. Like, where do I send my patch?
Yeah, it's the same for source. We need some
There is no answer to that one.
page on the
Well, it's
wiki
actually
or whatever for
fine.
quick patch sending.
Patches for source always comes down to the same frustrations. There are a bunch of places where you can send patches.
Yeah.
None of them really work unless you find the correct person to prompt via email or IRC to get them to look at it.
Yep. And it will be the same problem if we impose a review. We don't have a concept of maintainer, like Linux does, and this works for Linux because they have maintainers. And you just do you just call the port script get maintainer on your patch.
Yeah.
You say send your patches to this and this and this address.
I agree.
Or
Who to
you
talk
say
to?
make maintainer, it'll tell you. This.
Make maintainer should in
Yeah.
theory tell you who to talk to, but apparently we're not.
You have
Where we want to do that.
It tells you who you email first, and then you email someone else in 3 weeks.
I mean,
Look, I tried.
but I mean, if you submit the ports PR to Mozilla and tag it with the port, it will automatically assign it to the maintainer. It will automatically send an email to the maintainer.
I think it's there's a large number
Is
of
the format for how you tag it written somewhere, or do you have to just kind of?
You have the post name, the
the
category and the post name in the.
Will it catch it if it has if it's just written in the middle of the subject, or does it have to be square bracket?
It's detected wherever it is, as far as I remember.
Is
You
it
should-
break
It definitely does not have to be square bracket. I'm not sure if it's.
I think it even looks at the patch itself.
Pardon?
I think it might even look at the patch itself.
It might
Yeah.
be that.
We should ask.
And there are people running around the port street recategorizing and trying to get peers. So
Open source as well, there are a couple of people who spend a great deal of efforts trying to cull the bug tracker.
I am not saying Oxel as perfect.
Anyone here will say.
I am not
I would say
saying
but
ports.
I have stories for people.
And I'm not saying the ports.
But I've yet to encounter a bug tracker I actually like.
Yeah, there you go. That's the important thing, because like, they all suck, like, how can we make it work better?
Actually,
Yeah,
but
but
it's
it's
something
similar
like
like
trying to
fucking
find
well
out
driven
where
filter patch is on the internet.
So I think that's where
But I actually don't like the less simplicity this like
go into it. Open
Yeah.
issue, I think it is. That's what it calls it. Write it up, put an action for it, and it goes in somewhere. That's one area where Fabricator is not present.
There has been discussion about having patches that would sit in the bug tracker for long enough with no comment, no movement by the project, just automatically get committed.
That was wrong.
So we would have ASMR much faster.
That was certainly
That's the conversation that we have now, and we don't want either extreme, right? Like,
I kind of want to make it get where you just does that. Just to see what you end up with.
Truest.
Yeah. I have a variant of it that maintainers should really actually run for. That would
outside of maintainers.
Sorry?
Non-FreeBSD.org maintainers, right?
Yeah. No, I mean enforce. You don't need to commit to a port that you are maintaining of. Because
Yeah, I stopped
I think
you
we
will actually review those patches.
We review
Very pro.
I mean, I imagine for something like Nginx it gets reviewed. For something like RTG, I have a suspicion it does not get reviewed.
Or depends on who the committer is. I mean, we have committers that are very, very knowledgeable about FreeBSD. But like, I'm not one of them. And I've committed other people's patches, but I don't make a habit of that because I'm not as knowledgeable about the port's trees inner working. So I try to, I did the steps of built it, ran all the Portland, all that kind of stuff. But there are still things that are not quite, because I just don't understand.
But as a ports committer who works extensively with ports, every time I commit something for ports, if it's not from a person I know and trust that they have done their due diligence, I always run it through Clear and I always check what they're doing.
Well, part of the issue too is one port can tamper with another. And so, because they are independent, you can end up with some weird, and their cases don't show up most of the time. I
mean, there is no way to test all options. I always only test the default ones. So if you're talking about options, there's no way to test all permutations of all options. That's it.
Right, or I mean, even if my patch, say I do PostGIS, and someone does a change in Postgres port that changes a path, when the data paths got changed, that blew up all the PostGIS patches for months. The maintainer who that doesn't use PostGIS, no way to ever know about that.
Yeah.
The way is not easy.
But
Either you revert or you commit a follow-up fix.
Yeah. But on the other
It's not like
In my case, I just email people.
then revert and leave it as it is. There's no immediate solution.
That's, I think that's a committer.
Because we now just offloaded a whole bunch of responsibility.
Right, it's once there's a big enough list,
I mean, you don't build, you rarely build
That's like
ports
the full
that are dependent on your port. Because for some things, I mean, they're not usable by one person. If there's a big enough change and it touches enough ports, and you can tell from fresh ports how many ports you touch, then you can request an expert to have the cluster imploded.
Right. So the prettiest one I've ever seen are the Qt people. I posted a patch to them years ago.
Qt?
No, just Qt upstream Qt. Posted a patch in their bug tracking system, and their automated tooling came by and built the patch and tested the patch, and only then submitted it to someone for review.
Automatic things like that.
And
Automatic.
turns out it's not that much.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. It's
That's
a distinctly normal. Yeah.
tooling that we need to work on.
Yeah.
Leewin did a whole bunch of work. We need more of it.
Oh yeah, and we've made massive improvements by now having the CI system and having it run the tests. It is an underestimated improvement, absolutely. But it could be even better.
Yeah, just because we've gotten to this point doesn't mean we should stop talking about
Yes.
where to go next.
I think having institutional operations like that.
But we can't make it
Overhead and starting.
Yes. It is also a lot nicer to view things when it doesn't have any obvious
It's not a
linkage.
pleasant solution, but at the same time, we don't have any way of stopping it now, so if we make a change that also has no way of stopping it, it's a no loss. So,
Sorry.
Fourth Street is specifically complicated because some things fail randomly. And so you don't know if you do a CI build with just your patch and something, extra fails, it's kind of like,
It doesn't necessarily mean it's your fault.
but I don't think. What does feel random? All I'm saying is that we're kind of arguing about a red herring here, because we don't have any way to stop that now, and nothing we've been talking about will have a way to stop that. Now, theoretically, you get to yell, it's all zero sum. Okay, but I mean, you can yell at maintain, and yell at a committer to yell at the maintainer. You can actually yell at twice as many people. Or you can just yell at the entire force.
So the hand in the back?
Yeah, so a pain point from a user and planning perspective. It was discussed this morning in the core report, so I'm not sure what's going to happen. It'll be brought up after the survey, but it's in regards to the long-term support of certain releases. So currently we'll be tracking 11 on our devices until 11's end of life, because there's no certain roadmap for 12 and its life expectancy, where we know where 11's going, sort of thing. So, I mean, what's the take there? I know there's security concerns and that sort of stuff is why 12 sort of one of these ones where it may actually have a shorter lifespan. But going forward, is there some predictability that end users can sort of hedge their bets on when they're working with releases?
Part of the problem is that it's not something the project can control. In the end, we're at the mercy of OpenSSL and other things that are constituents of the OS. And we can't.
There was a question about long-term support policies. Alan's addressing challenges of OpenSSL.
And also, Core's attempts to work on this got slowed down by at least 3 deaths in the family, and a volcano, a hurricane, and 6 people and lots of things. So.
it's a complicated problem.
Yeah. And
It's more attention.
there's a lot of.
What proposals have there been, if anything? Just wild ideas to address that challenge and make a longer guarantee. So we're not victim of
The
volcanoes.
project probably isn't in a position to be able to make long guarantees. Right? We only have volunteers, and almost all of the development happens at the head of frame. And the project is likely better served by having more frequent releases and saying fewer point releases.
Which I don't have a problem with, but there's some predictability, like having some predictability. I mean, we track OpenBSD, but we know the predictability is we get 1+1, so effectively only 12 months of support on a particular release. So we can build around that because there is predictability in the release schedule. And it's really looking for the predictability. Yes, I'd love to have long-term support and have it in Ubuntu 5+5 or whatever sort of thing, but a project of this size can't have that. However, if it's like, yes, we have FreeBSD, but it's our long-term support is 3 years, fine, I can budget for that and I can work with that and do enough planning around that. But it's just having that date, similar to what we have with our Microsoft products that we use.
We hope to have that date figured out by the end of this month, but as I said, a bunch of things conspired to make it take a bit longer. But yes, it is the goal to have a definitive date for 12 before the summertime.
Could we make troublesome libraries like OpenSSL private to the system and use codes for others?
Try other.
Can you repeat?
How have the other OSs with long-term support releases handled that? What was the
I think Ubuntu is perfectly happy to change the version of OpenSSL in the middle and break it. They don't make the same guarantees that FreeBSD does.
I see.
They have people that can pay to backport OpenSSL. Nobody should be doing it.
Having used Ubuntu in a professional setting, shit breaks all the time. I mean, I've been on an LTS release and I've had kernel modules break between minor upgrades and stuff like that. So
one of the biggest problems with trying to use ZFS on Linux is that you have to recompile it for every minor kernel update, and they're constant because they break things all the time.
Valid points, all very, very valid.
And I mean, speaking of the Linux kernel specifically, and talking to Johannes Lindberg, who does most of the KPI stuff, the KPIs change constantly. I mean, for Linux, for FreeBSD, we try to keep the KPI in KPI, I think you say, stable in minor releases. And for the Linux kernel, it's churned all the time. That's why we always need. I mean, that's why I said before we need updates to KPI, because they keep on changing it all the time.
Are they not genuine when they say they have a long-term support, given that there's that churn?
The Linux, I don't think the Linux kernel has long-term support, but I don't know the Linux kernel module. On the other hand, I think, for instance, Red Hat, they pick a kernel and they basically stick with that kernel for the entirety of their. I mean, for instance, Red Hat 6 or Red Hat 7, they basically keep the same kernel and then they backport security fixes. They don't even backport drivers and stuff like that, only security fixes.
Okay.
And at least in Red Hat land, they also don't update their, what we call ports, but their packages. So they stick on the same version. For instance, you still get Apache 2 whatever it is and PHP 5 whatever. They try to backport security fixes for it, of course. And they might even succeed, I don't know. And people use Red Hat, so I assume they succeed. And they probably have the manpower to do that. But I mean, as their branch grows older, so to speak. For instance, Red Hat 6, Red Hat 7. The software you get gets older and older. In FreeBSD, I mean, ports are updated continuously, and you have also the quarterly branch. So I think that's the big difference. It's up to the various Linux distros to decide which kernel to run, how much support they will provide, rather than the Linux kernel upstream project, so to speak.
Yeah, the long-term support on a Linux kernel is a couple of months on every second version. I don't actually.
They do actually have long-term kernels that last for.
I think they're 18 months.
8 months?
18 months.
18, yeah, I was going to say it's like a year and a half or something, or I guess it was during the 3.0 era.
Yep.
Back when I was using Slackware. So they do exist, and a huge portion of the driver on their support life is the fact that Red Hat, SUSE, and someone else will grab one of those long-term support kernels and keep backporting stuff through for eternity. Because Slackware would put a fair amount of effort into making sure they only run the same long-term support kernel as Red Hat, and then decided whether or not to evolve it. Because the old version that I was supporting was probably actually better supported with the new long-term support because of Red Hat backporting things. Right.
Linux kernel long-time support release is now available. So this might have changed the difference. So this is an article from 2016, so it's not super relevant, but the Dexter was they released the 4.4 kernel. This is a long-term support release, as was determined at the Linux Kernel Summit and announced in October, and someone will maintain it for 2 years. That's what I found from
But that doesn't exactly line up with Red Hat, who picks that kernel like 6 months or a year before they release CentOS 8, and then keeps it for 7 years.
You're paying for that old kernel too. Like that's commercial backported support that you pay for. There's people doing it. They're paid for it. That's their job.
Yeah.
That's not our world. So it's apples and oranges.
True, but we shift that burden to the NetApps of the world who take whatever they take and have an internal team that keep it alive and
Sure, but NetApps
etc. So
care about long-term support.
Right.
they squeeze a lot of time out of. Maybe an example of these. How are vendors handling that?
Careful accusing NetApp of taking from the project also.
Let me rephrase that. How are
part of the
vendors
life as a
handling
part of the
that?
ecosystem.
Could we enable that? Could we enable Juniper and NetApp and whoever to kind of share that load?
I think they do from their perspective.
Valid answer.
I mean, their committers can commit to stable whatever, right? They could be committing to stable 9 today and we don't necessarily care.
Yeah, the common case supporting stable is not most of these people's primary objectives either, so.
Sure.
Beautiful segue into developer topics at the DevSummit. Any other dev topics to bring up? Contact me out of band as you wish to either thank or share your negative thoughts on what I've discussed. I know it's controversial, I get that. I'm happy to be a lightning rod. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback and some very vocal negative feedback, and it's a journey. I think we have more in common than we don't, and very common goals. And thank you for listening to that. Other topics? Take a break. Benedict, are you technically driving this? Alan, who's the
Now that Benedict's here,
DevSummit
I'm
manager?
Okay, I declare a pause.
Yay! Thank you.
It's all